Okay, but that's public domain. Okay.
Okay, but the point is that
so the $8 trillion is vastly more than what it would take to end poverty and environmental destruction.
yeah, and the other thing is, if you look at the statistics, you realize that 90% of the world's savings was being sucked out of the system by the U.S. military-industrial complex.
How do you prove that?
Well, again, this is all, I mean, I was a financial journalist for 25 years. This is all public record stuff, you know. I mean...
So just 90% of the U.S. budget is going to the military.
Here's an easy way to check. Just look at the U.S. external trade deficit and compare it to the U.S. military budget, and you'll find an amazing similarity over the years. And that's for a simple reason that the military does not produce tradable goods. They were a parasitic entity on the world economy. So what I said was simply, look, you know, why don't you just stop paying for this military? I told the Asians, and instead ask and set them to exploring space and stuff. But you know, the sort of thing that, you know, that's just common sense.
Okay, Ben, your audio just cut out on that last sentence.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that is common sense. And
okay,
what happened was an assassination order came out for me, and the South Korean secret police informed the Chinese that there was an order out to have me killed. And you can check, you know, my colleague, Paul Klebnikov, he was the Moscow bureau chief for Forbes magazine.
Okay.
He was shot 9 times outside of his apartment in Moscow. And he was still alive when the ambulance came an hour later. And he got to the hospital, and he was put in the hospital elevator, and the elevator was stopped for 8 minutes, and he died in the elevator. Okay, he was investigating a member of this same group that I was. He was investigating Boris Berezovsky, one of the oil tycoons. I was investigating Heizo Takanaka, but they all go back to the same cabal.
Right.
In any case, the South Koreans told the Chinese that an assassination order was out for me. And this was because of my publicly calling for the Asians to stop spending their savings on this vast military machine. Which, you got to remember, during the Cold War, at least you had this anti-communism excuse, but the war on terror was so obviously fake that it was just ridiculous to anybody with, you know, who does any serious research or investigation.
Right.
So, I got invited to join a Chinese secret society that offered me protection from his hit order, and that's where I found myself in this world of, you know, secret world of financial power. And the group that offered me protection was the group that was behind the non-aligned nations. You know, I think, and it crosses borders. If you think in terms of countries, you don't understand how these people work, because they have big factions in China, in the U.S., and Europe, both against and for them. So it crosses borders. And if you think in terms of nation states, you won't understand how these groups work. But in any case, a financial battle started, and there were many, many public salvos. In 2006, the Chinese wanted to use their dollars to do something other than buy treasuries. They tried to buy the oil company Wilcock. Congress passed a law saying they could not. So then they took their dollars and they went to Africa and South America and everywhere and started spending them on real things like mines and agricultural land and commodities, and not virtual things like fancy, impossible to understand derivatives products, which were basically con jobs.
Ponzi schemes, yeah.
Yeah, and so the other group, they tried to retaliate by jacking up food and oil prices. Remember, there were hunger riots in 33 countries at one point.
Yeah.
And it was an economist at the World Bank who pointed out that the reason there were people were going hungry was that they were paying farmers to grow oil instead of food. And that put an end to that. So then there was a counterattack, and they were told that we would no longer accept dollars printed within the United States. And that's what you know of as the Lehman crisis. And you can check this on the public record. If you look at Japanese export statistics from October or this November, say 2008, after the Lehman shock, you'll see something like a 76% year-on-year drop in Japanese car exports to the U.S. This was the Japanese and other people saying you can no longer use paper to buy stuff from the rest of the world. You have to trade with real things. Of course, your public was not let in on this.
Well, that's where I think people's brain is going to get busted. As what you just said is, nobody publicly knows that this Lehman shock had anything to do with
I know.
with
so
Asia.
The way to check it is to look at the export-import statistics after the Lehman shock. And the other way to check it is to look at the Baltic Dry Index. That's the price of shipping. You'll see the price of shipping dropped 90%, okay, right after the Lehman shock.
Wow.
And that's because the ships were no longer going to the U.S. full of stuff and then leaving empty. Okay? So these are ways people can verify what I'm saying with public record information.
Good. Okay.
Now, and then getting back to the blowing up of the nuclear or the underground bases, this group was being cut off more and more at the high level, and they were running out of money. They've been trying to extort money from various countries. They killed the youth group of the ruling party in Norway. That was this Norway attacks because they were trying to extort the $1.5 trillion oil fund the Norwegian government controls. They were saying, hey, we'll kill you if you don't hand over your money.
Just basically desperately trying to find cash.
Yeah, they invaded Libya to take over their oil fields because the Libyans were told them, hey, we're not going to give you oil for your paper anymore. And in the case of Japan, again, I have sources who are actually drug smugglers who have been selling drugs in Japan for 70 years. These are CIA types. This is the CIA drug smuggling division, okay? And they told me that a nuclear bomb had been brought in with their latest shipment of drugs. This was a 70-kilo shipment of adulterated Thai marijuana that was brought in through Okinawa, and they found a nuclear bomb mixed in with it. And of course, these guys, smuggling drugs is one thing, smuggling nuclear weapons is another. And they told the police, and they told me, and I made it public, and they followed the bomb as far as the North Korean Citizens Association headquarters in Tokyo. And I have independent confirmation from Mr. Paul Lane of Pentagon Military Intelligence. He was part of the Men Who Stare at Goats group, that 4 nuclear weapons were stolen from the Russian submarine, the Kursk, when it sank. I think it was in 2000 or something. And it was one of those nuclear weapons that was smuggled in. Then we have public...
Stolen by who, though?
Well, this is the Odessa group, the Nazi group, the one that was trying to set up a fascist world government, a Fourth Reich.
Okay, how did they get to the Kursk to get these nukes out?
I don't know the technical details, but they have submarine bases in various parts of the world. And so I'm assuming it was from these submarine bases.
Well, next question then would be, why would they need to get it from the Kursk if they're powerful enough to make their own?
You see, there's one thing to have. The public nuclear devices are under strict safety protocols.
Okay.
You can't just take them and then blow them up somewhere. There's just too many people involved in the chain of command. And they tried to do that. There were incidents where they just barely stopped a nuclear... Right,
like the Minot Air Force Base thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So these are not...
And the soldiers did a mutiny and basically would not commit this broken arrow where that's what they called it in code terms.
Yeah, well, there you go. And so what they needed was some nuclear weapons that were not under any official government control.
Okay.
And there was a Japanese drilling ship known as the Chikirumaru, okay, that can drill 10 kilometers into the seabed. And they were drilling at the exact epicenter of the earthquake. You know, we had an article from January 17th from a local paper saying they were drilling there, and they put the bomb in the seabed. And this was an attempt to extort money through terror from the Japanese.
So they warned that they had put the nuke in before they asked for money?
No, they asked for money after.
Oh, wow.
If you don't do it, next is Mount Fuji, okay?
Now that's for people who don't know, Fujiyama is right around Tokyo, which is the largest population center of Japan.
That's right.
So they're basically saying they would nuke Tokyo, which is how many million people? 30, 40 million?
30 million or so.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so, excuse me. You know, the Japanese Prime Minister Kan originally just sort of was so cowardly, he kind of said, oh yeah, all right, we'll sign over money. And he handed over something like 2 trillion yen. It's what, $20 billion, I think. Anyway, and they gave him a big bribe. But the evidence that this was not a natural disaster began piling up. And the result has been a battle here in Japan to remove these people from control.
Some people might not realize that there's any evidence that it was not a natural disaster. Could you just briefly touch on a couple points that you think are the most significant?
Well, if you look at the seismic chart, you'll see a sudden explosion. It's not like a natural earthquake where you have pre-shocks. It's just suddenly huge, and then it started fading down. The same with the underground bases. If you look at a seismic chart, it'll look like a big line all of a sudden appearing, and then the smaller lines afterwards. There's no build-up as you'd find in a natural earthquake. And the other thing is that, I mean, there's plenty of evidence. There was the governor of Fukushima province told me that they overruled him and put plutonium in reactor number 3 1 month before this tsunami incident.
Only a month before?
Yeah, and then we had, there was a company called Higashi Nippon House that makes cheap housing in northeastern Japan, and their stock price was shooting up in the month before the attack. And you got to remember, Japan's got an aging and shrinking population. It doesn't make sense for a cheap housing company's stock price to go shooting up like that unless there was something in the works. And the other is that a group of us had recorded a conversation between Kurt Campbell, who's your deputy foreign minister in Asia, and Japanese power broker Ichiro Ozawa on March 9th, 2011. And in this conversation, Campbell asked Ozawa not to split the ruling party and force the creation of a new government. And they said that they would give him the rights to zeolite in Fukushima province. Now, zeolite is used to clean up radioactive waste. And this conversation was recorded on March 9th, 2 days before the tsunami attack. The other point is that a man by the name of Takamasa Kawase from Japanese military intelligence subsequently told me that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, after the attack, phoned Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan and said that they would cause other nuclear disasters around Japan if they did not start handing over the money. And the chief Mossad agent in Japan, by the way, now is a guy called Michael Green. He's a nasty piece of work, and we're going to remove him from this country soon. But in any case...
one question, though.
Yeah, before
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
In order to confirm that what this guy told me, I checked, and there was an Israeli company that for some reason was in charge of security at the Japanese nuclear plants. Okay?
Oh, my gosh.
So I was able to confirm that through other sources, okay? And this is publicly available information. Who was in charge of security at Fukushima, okay? It was an Israeli company.